Seems like the older I get, the more frequently I cry at the drop of a hat. Yesterday I was watching Liam's football game, and the pass was completed, and I started to cry because the pass was completing. I feel as if the older I become, the more I feel, and the more sentimental I become, the more I'm taken in by things like love songs. I got to hear one of my favorite love songs of all time at the symphony concert in the tribute to Aretha Franklin, which was just incredible last week. And that's Nat King Cole's Unforgettable. That's what you are. And it wasn't that long ago that Bev and I heard Michael Bublé's version of When I Fall in Love, It Shall Be Forever. And Paula pulled up in her car yesterday and had the door open and singing the song that was sung at our wedding, Longer Than, by Dan Fogelberg. Oh, the older I get, the more I love love songs. Love songs have this way of drawing many of us in, touching our emotions and sending us off into a temporary high place. Our first reading for today from Isaiah really started to draw me in when I read it. It started to touch my heart when the prophet on behalf of God says, and probably meant to sing, "Let me sing for my beloved my love song concerning his vineyard." Wow, this is going to be really good. This is going to make me feel very warm and cuddly, probably make me cry. My beloved had a vineyard. Oh, beloved, I love the language. I always tell people I'm married that it matters how we speak to one another, that we ought to choose our words carefully. Words make a difference. And by the way, God in this parable or in this text is the beloved. My beloved had a vineyard on a very fertile hill. Oh, this is going to be such pretty stuff. Fertility means fecundity, one of my favorite words. Growth and greenness. Well, the love song goes on. My beloved dug the vineyard and cleared the stones and planted it with choice vines. In other words, the beloved put in a lot of work on behalf of the loved one, on behalf of the vineyard. This is the work of love, of deep care, of deep commitment, of remarkable hope. The beloved built a watchtower in the midst of the vineyard and hewed out a wine vat in it. Oh, the beloved wants the loved one to be safe, wants the loved one to be protected. And yes, the beloved has great expectations for the loved one, great expectations for the vineyard. You don't put a big wine vat in if you think that vineyard's not going to produce. Great expectations are a part of what love has for the loved one. I'm really loving this love song. It's just drawing me in. It's feeling so good. But something goes wrong. The beloved built a watchtower in the midst of the vineyard and hewed out a wine vat in it. He expected it to yield grapes, but it yielded wild grapes, sour grapes, spoiled grapes, fruit that stinks. I think that's what the Hebrew really says. Fruit that stinks. Oh man, this is a love song or a love affair that didn't take long to go sour. And now, inhabitants of Jerusalem and people of Judah, that's where you find Jerusalem, judge between me and my vineyard. Now, what more could I have done for you that I didn't already do? I loved you deeply and fully, and you didn't live love out of that love. And it's true, isn't it? You know it. You know it to be true. So bring the judgment on yourself. Well, the love song ain't so lovely anymore. I'm not hearing Unforgettable. I think I'm hearing the Righteous Brothers who are now singing, You've Lost That Love and Feeling. You got to hear this, people. You got to hear this first of all before you hear about the righteous brothers losing the love and feeling. It is a love song. It's a love song that's being sung today. God is in love with God's people. Don't ever doubt that. Never doubt that. In many ways, the Bible is one giant love song. It starts in love. It starts with the risk that the Creator takes in creation. Have you ever thought about it? God needed something. That's why He had to create. He needed something and someone to love. God mustn't have been content with God's self. What an image for us, by the way, who like to think we are self-made people. Don't need anybody else. God Himself needed someone to love. So God creates. And Genesis tells us right off the bat that we are the crown of God's creation. We are made in the image and likeness of God. It all began in love, and then it continues in love. Do you know the next big story that follows? It's the story of the Exodus. The people of Israel are set free from slavery in Egypt. Why? Because God loves. The peoplehood of Israel comes out of freedom, giving love. Love is where it all starts. Love is the foundation. And you know this, love isn't always easy. Love has expectations. Love experiences disappointment. It's obvious that God's disappointment in the reading from Isaiah is huge today. He had such high expectations for Israel, and right now I am sure He is grieving over what is happening in that land. And the Israel of Isaiah's time was so disappointing. And the disappointment, God knows, causes him to be like a parent who has simply just had enough. All right then, have it your way. You want your room to be a mess? Well, then let it be a mess. You want life to be a mess? Well, then live a mess. I'm not going to protect you anymore. I'm removing the hedge that is around the vineyard. I'm breaking down the wall. I'm not going to prune anymore. I'm not going to hoe. If this is what you want, well, this is what you're going to get. Now, maybe a couple of you, I know not many, have said that kind of thing in relationship to your kids or other people in your life. You're just so frustrated that you don't know what to do, but let them be in the mess that they created. And you decide, I've heard you say this, I've talked to you. By the way, I've said it too. You're going to remove all the ways that you've propped them up. Let's face it, love has to be tough sometimes. Love has to say, that is simply enough. Love does not always equal niceness. Boy, I wish it did. I'm a nice guy. I like to major in niceness. I wonder, why is God so ticked off today? Why is He throwing this little tantrum? Well, Isaiah tells us, he says he expected justice. God expected justice but saw bloodshed. He expected righteousness but heard a cry. Now, we won't understand these words very well because they're written in Hebrew and they represent plays on words in Hebrew. It's as if they are saying something like this. God hoped for justice, and all He got was injustice. He hoped for equity, and all He got was iniquity. God is ticked off because the life of Israel doesn't represent the justice that He is and expects. A small group of folks are making it big, and others are being left behind. The rich are doing well in the courts, Isaiah tells us, and the poor are paying the price. The concern in Isaiah is not private morality, but social injustice. As we look at our own world and our own community, we need, if we're going to be faithful to the God of the prophets like Isaiah, to concern ourselves with the well-being of everybody, especially those who are left behind in a culture that is always clamoring for more and more and more. You know, right now, you and I are living in a time in Muskegon when some really amazing things are occurring. The development that is happening here, and especially in our downtown, is absolutely remarkable. And if you know me, and some of you do know me, you know that I am a big supporter of this town. You can't find a bigger supporter than me, and a big supporter of our downtown. And we have every reason to be proud of what we are becoming. I love living here, but we must be careful. If we want to be faithful to the God who is ticked off at Israel, as we go forward, we would do well to pay attention to all our people, especially the vulnerable and the fragile, which, by the way, is why I appreciate the work that comes from organizations like Community and Compass and Samaritas. Samaritas recently completed a building in our downtown that provides affordable housing for those with limited resources. And they are looking now to add a second site. This is the kind of work that is required by the God of Isaiah. God's love song is especially poignant, the Bible would tell us, for those who are too often left behind by a money and power-dominated society. We know that that love song will never be content with a society that is dominated simply by power and money. Now, you know, I generally see my task in preaching as proclaiming good news. I'm a Lutheran. This is how we see preaching. It's the proclamation of good news. And while good news is apparent in Paul's wonderful message in Philippians today, it does seem quite absent in the other texts, which is why Paul has struggled to figure out what to say to kids about these other texts. In Isaiah, God's ticked off at social injustice. In Matthew, in that weird story, the tenants of the vineyards are only concerned about themselves and with what? Their money and their power. And they are so concerned that they commit violence against the owner's representatives and then eventually the owner's son. And then we are told that the owner, who clearly is God, will put those wretches to a miserable death. Well, there's some good news to preach. I mean, I'm going to put you folks to miserable death. God is, like in Isaiah, ticked off. But not, by the way, with the whole nation of Israel this time. He's ticked off with its leaders. Hate to hear that. It's the leaders who are rejecting the Son, who clearly is Jesus. God is up to something new where the first are the last and the last are the first. But all that the leaders want to do is to snuff that newness out, eliminate it. And I think most of you know the story. Eventually they will crucify it. So where's all the good news? Where's the good news in any of that? Well, Matthew tells us that what the leaders are up to is not the final word. Quoting Psalm 118, he says, "Have you never read in the scriptures that the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone?" The leaders, they are the builders, may reject Jesus, but ultimately, we're being told, God does not. The crucified one will be raised. God's stamp of approval will be placed on one whom the folks in charge have rejected. Yes, some of the readings for today seem particularly ugly, depressing, and angry. Truthfully, we need to come to grips with the critique we are getting today. We haven't been living in light of a love song that God has been singing to us. And sometimes we make a mess of things. Our world is not the just place it ought to be. But as Joe Labiak pointed out at our Bible study on Wednesday night, we really have got to keep reading the story. It ain't over until it's over. And truthfully, it's not over in Isaiah. If you keep reading Isaiah, you will see that God doesn't stay mad forever. Eventually, we will hear the people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Eventually, we will hear comfort, comfort you, my people. Already next week, we will be told, you still need to come back next week, but already next week, we will be told that God is going to make a feast of the finest food and drink for all peoples. It's important that we be present for the whole story. You can't get the whole story in 1 week. But rest assured, the story isn't over with rejection or injustice. It is a love story that God is singing to his people from beginning to ending. We may reject love, and yes, God gets frustrated and angry with that, as you get frustrated when your love is rejected. But the stone that the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. The love story goes on. And if the story we tell about the rejected one is a story of resurrection, we will know that the love story never, ever ends.